In this video, we'll be covering the Note Repeats device. And the question you're going to ask yourself a lot of times as we go through this video is, why not just use the arpeggiator? Because at their core, they kind of do the same thing. They take your input and then they split up the note into smaller notes. So when we use the arpeggiator and we have it set just to like eighth notes, we're taking that sustained note, splitting it into eighth notes, and we have controls like velocity and gate. So like over time, if I kind of want to like ramp down velocity, I could do it. Or also kind of change the gate length on these. Right? Or even just completely skip steps entirely. Or essentially, you know, have this be muted. Right? And then I can even go in, and if I wanted to create like melodies or whatever, I could do that. Now, the thing with the arpeggiator is typically, historically, if you're playing in chords, it's going to then split out that chord. And now that is something that the Note Repeats is not going to do. So when I bring our Note Repeats in, you're going to see that I can mimic some of that behavior. I could universally adjust the gate length. Or I can even hit this hold until next trigger. And this is kind of a fun one in real time because it's then going to sustain the note, and then it's going to, after I unclick it, go back to chopping it up. And that's kind of cool. Or we can also have this disable repeats that, again, we could click on or off. But notice as I'm hitting other notes, it's not going to like lock those into the grid. It's not going to do what the arpeggiator is doing. So at any time, depending on when I hit the note, that's when those repeats are going to start. So that is fundamentally different to the arpeggiator, at least the arpeggiator in its normal configuration. You could bring a quantize in, and at a time I was going to like show you, oh yeah, you know, you could turn the quantize on and really mirror the arpeggiator, but that's not really the point of the video. The point is to kind of show these differences, so I'll just get rid of that. One other cool feature here is the decay option. So this is linked to velocity. So you can see in our synthesizer here, I have 100% velocity set up here, but with Bitwig, you know, you can route velocity to other things as well, and you'll kind of get like a ramping effect up or down. So you can kind of experiment with that on your own time. But here, let's go ahead and let's bring the decay down to like 90. And I'm going to hit the note very hard. And we're going to hear over time that it's going to start to get quieter and quieter with each iteration. Oops, sorry. And I feel like, you know, the fun thing with this in terms of like coming up with patterns or different uses for it, like if you were doing this with hi-hats and really trying to get different kind of hits and things every time, would be to route these things to some different things on your controllers or even just different keys and kind of play with that in real time while the note is going, get all that MIDI information in there and then bounce it out. So just my opinion there. You could also do this in reverse. So I could hit a note very quietly and then ramp it up. And then the only other thing really to look at, we'll look at this in a second because this is kind of unique. We also do have the randomness, the chance, and that is just whether or not the note is or isn't going to repeat. So if we put this down to like 50-ish%, and we're not utilizing the pattern at this point, so it's just, is it going to play or not really relative to anything. So we can look at that more as we get into burst and this Euclid mode. I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce that. The only other thing to look at here on this view before we get into all that is the time-based option. So like every other sort of Bitwig thing, you can offset things relative here. You can go in, use second bars, all of that stuff. But the fun one is kind of this pitch. So right now it's going to be going like so fast that you can't really hear the difference that's happening, but it's related to frequency, right? So the higher the pitch, the higher the frequency, the faster those repeats. But if you bring this down to like, let's just say 0.5, that could actually be something fun to play with for some experimental type of music. Like a lot of these devices that we've looked at recently, it's hard to find the obvious clear-cut use cases for like non-experimental music. This one, for hi-hats, for like a bass line even potentially, you could experiment in kind of just the more standard settings. And of course you can automate any of these things, but you would kind of maybe just drop this in here because it might be a little faster than using the arpeggiator. And just that reminder, and I should have shown this earlier in the video, that you can export this information at any time. And that's just a very important thing, especially when you're dealing with randomness. Like, make sure you bounce out some results so that you have something repeatable for your actual productions. Okay, so we have this routed to synth. Let's go ahead and see the result we get. And it's paying attention to all that automation I did. Parameter we didn't really automate was the time base, but you could have done that too if you wanted to. Okay, that's enough. So when we go in here and we actually look at and like inspect these notes, if I bring up the right thing, we can see stuff like the velocity, for example, changing. And I think that's the one we would see, but then we obviously were changing different things in terms of, is it going to hold out or not? So just keep that in mind always. When you're working with any of these note devices, I think that that's kind of important. So we've reset everything, and now we'll go ahead and we'll look at the two different modes. We have burst, and then I don't know how to pronounce this, Euclid, not sure. But basically all you need to know about those different modes is burst, a block of repeats, like all in a row. Euclid, evenly spaced repeats. And you'll see that when we then bring it up. So when I was first working with this thing, I was like very overwhelmed by all these options, but it's actually quite simple. So what we have here is a burst all happening, followed by silence depending on the length, or instead of silence, unplayed notes. So if I bring this down to just 4, and our density is like 32%, we can see that it's only going to do 1. But as I bring that up, you can see we then get to our 2, we get to our 3, we get to our 4. So now it's just going to hit every time. But you notice that the following 3 are quieter because we have this accents turned on. And the percentage of accents here is actually impacting most of them. But if I bring this up here, you can hear what's happening. We get the quieter ones. And let me actually leave it there for a second so we can see the other things. And then I can offset this low velocity so I can really make that quiet. Let's bring it up so we can at least hear it. Or I can flip it around, which is kind of cool. And then we also have our keep accents. So this is going to be tied to the random mode. So if I bring our randomness down to like 20%, but I turn keep accents on, we're going to hear that it's always going to play those 3. And then our random is, at this point, only tied to that. If we bring it up, we'll get to hear it a few more times. There we go. There you go. That time you heard it. And I know the low velocity is really low. There you go. So that really essentially is how this works. Like, those are really the options. So if we go back out here and we kind of bring this up to 8 or something, what we could potentially do is like bring it down so that we're playing like 6 in a row. And let's bring our randomness back to 100%. So it's always playing. Those two are never going to play. Let's put our low velocity here. And yeah, we'll bring our count down a little bit. And then this is kind of like the pattern that we've generated. And where it gets interesting is like the timing of the notes that I'm playing here. So again, up to you to kind of experiment in how you would use it. Let's bring this to like 16th notes just to get it going a little faster. And then we're going to bring our randomness down just a little bit. I don't want to keep accents on. I'll let it just kind of do its thing. And so you could see you could get some wild stuff. And then you could also like rotate this in like real time. So and that will be very relative to like when you're playing the notes. So again, if you have enough hands, if you're like an octopus, you got the skills, you could also kind of do some wild things with rotate in real time, or just like offset things if you needed to. So first 2 quiet. And again, you might be thinking like, oh, okay, well, like, what if I wanted to like just turn this one off? But that's where you then start to think, okay, I need to use the arpeggiator. Right? Like I can't really do that within this. I could use random, but like I can't get that consistent result over and over again. That's just not how this thing works. With the Euclid mode, what we then have is like it evenly spaces things out of what is and isn't going to play. So let me just like bring this all back to its default state so I don't get confused. Okay, and we have like 16, and then we can see that we have 5 playing, and there's 3 in between. And then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Let me bring my density down. And then we should be even, right? So we have 3 spaces of silence. Like that. And we could rotate it to then make it a little wild. In real time. Something like that. Let's just make our density exactly 25%. So nobody's like getting confused on how this is working. And I'm going to adjust this so that you can see, right, if I bring this down to 0, none are getting accented, none are springing out further. But if I bring that to 25%, well, in this case, it's actually because it's 16th notes. Sorry, my math is so bad. We could see, like, I guess after 12% is when one is going to jump up. And there's our accented. Or if we want to accent. Trying to see what order it accents it in. Okay, so we can see the top one, the bottom one, the left one, and then the right one. And I don't really know if there's a logic, an obvious logic to that, but that's the way that it's working. Again, you can rotate, change the density, do the opposites, keep accents, but that's how this thing works. So like with this one, again, like I think showing it in 16th notes is like probably the best example, or we could go to, again, 8th notes and switch this over to 8th notes. And again, decide how many times is this going to play. Let's do that. So we have a break of 2, 2, and 1. And that's cool because you can hear the accent happening. And I like playing things off time. And if you do hit your chords at the same time, of course, it will work like so. Let's bring our low velocity back in to really emphasize it. And then, of course, combine it with your other options if you want to do that. So that's how this note repeats thing is working. Again, the only thing that can be a little confusing are these two different mode options, but just remember that they have a logic to them in terms of notes in a row or notes evenly spaced. So that's kind of all you need to know. Otherwise, I think this is very self-explanatory and easy to work with. So now what we'll do is we'll jump into the manual and we will see if the manual gives us some interesting use case examples. And if not, we can also go through and maybe look at some of the presets here. So this is maybe the first time the manuals let me down just a little bit, but I think it's because the device is very self-explanatory. So if you look at the use cases, you'll see it's all things that we've covered. But this one is cool, and this is the one I will show you. So giving life to long chords with a low chance setting, but the hold until next trigger option is on, keeping each note sustained until the eventual retrigger arrives. So what I've done inside of Bitwig is I've brought in an instance of scalar, and I've changed my settings on the instrument just a little bit to make it more interesting, and you'll understand why I did that in a second. So we can really kind of hear the envelopes and the chopping of the note. But here we can listen to these chords. If we turn the note repeats on and we have the hold until next trigger off and the chance down, you're going to hear something kind of cool, but it's not going to be as usable, I should say. So let's listen to this. Okay, so what's happening there is like it's recognizing all of the notes that have been hit, but then it's not continuing to hold out the chord. So sometimes you're getting one note, sometimes you're getting two notes, sometimes you're getting combinations, sometimes you're not. That might be what you're going for, but you'll hear how this sounds pretty cool once this is on, because it's sustaining. Okay, and then I'm just gonna like record something in here very quickly so we can see it. Okay, and then obviously when we bounce the result there, it's gonna be different to what we just heard because of the chance parameter at play. But I have to say, I think that is pretty cool. That is not something we can ever do with the arpeggiator. All right, and then the final thing we can do is just look at some of these presets, see if there's anything that really jumps out to us. I think most of them are going to be pretty standard. This one's kind of cool. Occasionally it changes up. This one, I believe we'd have to hit the fill button. So there you go. And yeah, sometimes you want to make sure you have these things open. You can even turn on the pattern modes. Yeah, that one's cool. Okay, this is more of just a standard pattern. Okay. Again, I like those random bursts that are kind of throwing things around here. Let's see. What do we got this going to? Steps and rotate there. Pentagon on offbeats. Yeah, I mean... Nothing too exciting. Let's see, what do we have this going to? To disable. Yeah, it doesn't appear to be doing anything. Yeah, I'm not really sure why this would be on here, to be honest. I don't really understand, but maybe it's just me not understanding. Okay. That's kind of cool. Okay, that's keeping it super consistent. Not hearing a huge difference with some of those, but I'm sure different things are happening. Let's turn that off. Yeah, well, am I ever going to use these? Probably not, but this will be more interesting with the scaler turned on. Sometimes that's actually even getting triggered on and off here, which is kind of cool. I like that one. And then finally we have Wheel of Fortune. Okay, that's fun. Yeah, so it's like somebody spinning a wheel and then slowly coming to a stop. But it never actually comes to a stop. Okay, anyway, that's enough for me from this video on the note repeats. Like always, feel free to share your experiences of how you work with it, how you use it, how you combine it with other note effects as well. So thank you for watching. I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.